My own mother died when I was only 8 years old.
Welcome to Northsid TV. Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to get notifications for more videos.
Policemen converged on us, arrested some of us, beat us on the head, put some of us in the Black Maria, and drove. Thank you very much. You have asked a question that will take quite some time to answer. Yes, my father, Joshua Falae, was an Akure man. His father, Falae, was son of Adano, Oladipo. Sorry, that was his grandfather. His own father was Falae, was Saribi. Owose chiefs in Akure, by the original high chiefs, Alakure. So my grandfather, whose name was Falae, which I bear, was Saribi. That is an indigenous title. His own father was Hajano in Akure. My father's mother was a year or so took at a and her mother was Alejo, grandson to Dejo Shupa. My father's grandmother, great grandmother, was Oshami, direct daughter of Dejo Shupa. In fact, she was born in Benin with the name of Osame. So when Ochupa returned to Akure to become Deji, brought her along with his other children. And when they got here, she got married, and her first child she named Alejo. Although I'm an Akure person, I'm more or less an Alejo in my hometown because we've been long away in Benin. So that Alejo, her first daughter, Oshupa gave to Deji Elema Dedipe to be his wife. And she gave back to Osonituke, my father's mother. So my father's grandfather's side, Ajano. The grandfather of Abami. On his mother's side, Elema Dedipe to be Yae. Omo Deji Oshupa. That is why today, by the grace of God, I'm the chairman of Elema Dedipe Elders Council and deputy chairman of Chuparuni House, who by the grace of God produced the present Deji of Akure. So the Deji and I were cousins in Ilemo because his mother, Moumi, was the daughter of Okira. Okira was born by Elema Dedipe. So Okira and Osonituke, my grandmother, of the same father, the same Elema Dedipe, to be Iya Baba mi lo bi Baba Iya Deji to one bed. So in Ilemo we are first cousins. In Ojuwa ruling house, Oshami, my father's great grandmother, and Odudun, Deji's great grandfather, were children of the same father, Ojupa. So in Deji dynasty, we are cousins. In Ilemo, we are cousins. So my relationship in Akure, on both sides, one from Adano, one from Ilemo, and Deji Ojupa. So that is my ancestry in Akure. I've been talking about my father. Because it is only my father who's from Akure. My mother was from Igbaraoke. Her name was Aino. Her father was Alonge, I remember he started in Igbaraoke. Her mother, Payeyebi, was the daughter of Odumu Odu of Igbaraoke. In fact, if you go to Igbaraoke today, I have a house there built in memory of my mother. So both her mother and her father were chiefs in Igbaraoke. So I belong to Odumu family in Igbaraoke, Odumu Odo, and Egbedi Alonge, Robi Yami, Baba Yami Alonge. So in all my source from my origin, everywhere, it's traditional, it's noble, it's chiefly. At the time when Kabiyesi Adelegon honored me with a chieftaincy and wrote me a letter, in those days I was not interested in the traditional institution at all. So I told my father I would not accept it. And I expected him to back me. I said, what have you got to do with such thing? But he said, only you cannot avoid this. Gbogbo ibi tó ti jáde, wọ́n ti joyè. Ó ní ìyá ẹ̀ ọmọ Ẹ̀gbẹ̀dì ló gbàrà òkè. Ìyá ẹ̀ ọmọ Òdùmọ̀ Odó ní gbàrà òkè. Ohun tó ń jẹ́ bàbá fún mi, ẹlẹ́mọ bí ìyá òun, Ọ̀ṣọ́nútúkẹ́. Déjì bí ìyá ẹ̀, Ọ̀ṣáàmí. Bàbá tóun, ó jẹ́ Sàrìbì Sọ́wọ́sẹ́, bàbá ẹ̀, ó Jàjànà. Sógbè l'Àkúrẹ́. Pẹ́sọ́ gbogbo ibi tí mo ti jáde. Lóye tí ó lóun papọ̀ tún lọ dáko ní àgọ́ ààbò náà ìlú ààbò. Ó ní wọ́n tún tì ó mọ́lẹ̀, wọ́n tún fi ṣe olórí wọn bẹ̀, baálẹ̀ nẹ́nu olú. Ó ní so kò síbi tí mo lè sá sí. I was overwhelmed. Of course, I agreed to accept the title Deji Adelegon offered me in 1977. So this in brief is my ancestry. But let me say that I was born here, born in my father's village on the 21st of September 1938. How did I come to know this? My father, Joshua Falae, went to school, St. Stephen's Junior Primary School, for a few years, according to what he told me. And after a few years, he fell ill. He had to withdraw from school. When they got better and wanted to return, he was told, you have missed a lot of sections. What was taught your classmates. How will you know? So why don't you stay home and resume next year? Start afresh. He stayed home. But thereafter, he was made to go and live with his uncle, Papa Samuel Aguadidipe, the second Baba Ijo St. David's Cathedral, the father of Oremeji. So my father went to live with him, and he never went back to school. So it pained him a lot. In fact, the slate, the breakable slate they were using those days, which he used, he kept it until I started school in 1944. I guess I must have been in school maybe around, because I was born in 1897. I can prove that to you later. And so I must have started school maybe around 1907, 1908. If he left in 1910, and I started school in 1944, it means that he kept the slate for 33 years, more than 30 years, because he wanted me to go to school and use his slate. And the name I bear, Oluyemi, was the name of his last teacher, Mr. Oluyemi, who taught him in St. Stephen's School. So as a memorial and permanent link with education, he gave his first son his teacher's name, Oluyemi, and gave me his own slate, which, by the way, was broken by my late friend, Kayode Falae. Because we are friends and classmates, we sat together in primary school. He broke the slate. And he confessed to my father later that he broke my slate. Why he did so, we can come to that later. As I told you, my father went to school but was not allowed to continue. The reason really why he was not allowed to go back was that his uncle, his father's mother's younger brother, Papa Samuel Aguadidipe, in his time, he was perhaps the most prominent Akure person after the Deji. He was the president of Egbe Kila, the most popular group in Akure. He was the first of the two tailors in this, himself and this Ifemana. So Ameji Lokokoshi tailors in Ley. He was one of the first three to build his house with roofing shades. He was a rubber magnate and the Babaijo of St. David's Church. So a man combined all those things in those days. Clearly was one of the most prominent and successful people in this community. Unfortunately for him, he had 4 wives at that stage, or no child. That's what my father's mother told me. I lived with my grandmother. That movie more on me. My own mother died when I was only 8 years old. So it was my father's mother, who brought me up inside the Lemon's house. So he said her brother, Ago, had no child at that time. Very rich, prominent, successful man. And Mama was worried that he might not do anything negative to himself. So he decided to donate my father to him. Kofi Shomo. So eventually he had his own children, but for a long time he didn't have any. So my father was the only child that he had. So my father was living with him. And that was why he was not allowed to go back to school. And my father said he promised himself and God that if he ever had a son, he school lo ma laju si lo ma ti gbon. Kò ní gbọ́n sóko, kò ní láyé. So when I was 5 years and 3 months old, January 1944, my father took me to St. Stephen's School, his own former school. But ká tó lọ síbẹ̀, we call that what we call the CMS book, it's now called CSS. It was CMS there. Same build, that's me building there. But we don't look, Ojo àti Ajayi, Ojo àti Aina and all that. At some stage and bought a bag and took me to St. Stephen's School. On getting there, in those days, you must pass a test before you can be admitted. What was the test? You stretch your right hand over your head and touch your left ear. Tó o bá ti lè ṣe bẹ́ẹ̀, o ò tí ì mature tó láti bẹ̀rẹ̀ school. So I failed that test, and my father was asked to take me back home and bring me back the following year. My father said, no way. That was the way he was tricked from school, and he never returned. That they must take me into school. If I was not mature enough to enter the classroom, they should allow me to play around the field. Pé ìjọ tí n bá dàgbà, tí n bá gbọ́n kan jẹ́ kí n wọ class. They kàn jí mi àjẹ́ láàrin bí ìgbà tẹ́dí ẹ̀ ń jẹ́ láàrin àdúgbò. But the teacher said, no, you don't do it like that. But for 4 days, my father took me back to the school every morning. On the 4th day, I think, the headmaster, Mr. Odesomi, he later became Reverend Odesomi in the CAC church. He said, Baba, my father said, you must take this boy. So in frustration, he took us across the road to the vicarage to see Reverend Otenaike, who was the vicar of St. David's Church and the manager of the school. So when we got to Reverend Otenaike, I remember clearly now, I was sitting at his table, was wearing a light yellow short-sleeve shirt, khaki shorts, and hose. So Mr. Odesomi and my father entered the office. I stood in the passage. I didn't enter with that, but I was watching them from a distance. My father produced all the receipts which he received for all the church dues he paid since 1922 or thereabout, and told Reverend Otenaike that his father, i.e., his uncle, was one of the founding fathers of the church that owned the school. That he could see the grandchildren of idol worshippers and masquerade people already admitted into the school. Here is the grandson of one of the founders of the school. Funny to me that you are refusing to admit. No, so no. I'm not refusing. It's not mature. I said, no, it's mature. Take it. After a lot of argument, Reverend Otenaike ruled that they should go and find space for me anywhere they could find space. So we are going from one class to another. Went to infant primary 1A, no vacancy. The teacher's name was Mr. Adebisi, I remember. We went to 1B. There was just one vacancy, which I was asked to fill. So I was asked to go and sit down there. And I said, no, I'm going with my father. Because I had never left him before. And for the first time, my father hit me. That's how I started school. 5 years and 3 months old. From what I've told you, you now know that most of my classmates were older than I was. And in fact, the man with whom I sat, next to whom I sat, Mr. forgotten his name now. Later I discovered he was some 6 to 7 years older than myself. In fact, at the end of school each day, he would take me from St. Stephen's School to Ilemon and to my grandmother's house. In the morning, he would call there to take me to school, and we were classmates. That was, that was the kind of group into which I was admitted. Yes, that was in 1944. At the end of the year, I was promoted to class 2, and I was very excited. I got home, I showed my father my card that I passed, and I was promoted to class 2. My father said that was my business. As long as I was allowed to stay in the school, that was all that concerned me. Whether you passed, you did not pass, you are promoted or you are not promoted. It didn't bother him. He was happy that I was already in school and staying in school. And I want to say that I stayed in St. Stephen's School until 19 primary, it was St. David's Junior Primary School. The counterpart of St. David's Senior Primary School, located in Ijebu. There were 2 halves of the same primary school. So at the end of 1948, I was promoted to standard 3, and I went to what we called new site. That's what we called it. And that was how I completed my primary education in December 1952. And in the course of 1952, I took a number of entrance examinations to secondary schools, namely Government College Ibadan, Christ School Ado-Ekiti, Igbobi College Yaba, and lastly Aquinas College. I'm happy to say I passed virtually all of them. In fact, the principal of Government College Ibadan, Mr. Long, drove from Ibadan to Akure to interview me. Myself, Falae, who is now dead, and Adewale Fatoyinbo, also dead. I'm sure these are names that will ring a bell here in Akure. Falae was a lawyer. Fatoyinbo was principal of Aquinas College and later a politician. Those are the 3, plus myself, that Mr. Long came from Ibadan to interview. Now you can draw your own conclusions. Why should the principal of Government College drive from Ibadan to come and interview 3 boys in Akure when thousands of boys took the entrance examination? But all I know was that he told us, he interviewed us, and he said, by the way, Falae and I were in the same class in St. David's School. Adewale Fatoyinbo was in LA Primary School. So we had to get somebody on a bicycle to go and bring him from LA School to St. David's to be interviewed. Eventually he came, and the 3 of us were interviewed. And Mr. Long told us that we have to come to Government College Ibadan for the final interview that he will write to us. Till today, I never got the letter inviting me for the interview. I tell you how the story proceeded later. But I didn't get the letter, none of us got it, and none of us went for the interview. But in the meantime, I passed by the way, the day, it's a very interesting story. That was Government College. Entrance exam to Igbobi College took place a few weeks later. The same day, Christ School interview was taking place. I'd taken Christ School interview a few weeks before. Coincidentally for me, the day Igbobi entrance was taking place was the day Christ School interview was taking place. And because Mr. Reverend Mason, who was principal of Christ School, used to be a housemaster at Igbobi College, and a friend to Mr. Parker, the then principal of Igbobi College, they agreed that they will conduct their own interview the same day. They knew that the same set of boys would take the 2 entrance examinations. So when we finished the examination to Igbobi College, entrance exam to Igbobi College, which Reverend Parker himself came from Lagos to supervise to conduct, we proceeded to what we call St. Mans, which is Vining College. Now we call it Vining College. So we went there, and Reverend Parker was staying in one room. Reverend Mason was staying in another room at this Vining College to interview us. In the case of Igbobi, the interview was taking place the very day the entrance examination took place. In the case of Christ School, the entrance exam had taken place a few weeks before. So they were also holding it the same day in the same place. So when it was my turn to be interviewed, I was called into Reverend Parker's room. As I entered the place, Reverend Mason left his own room, came into the same room, and sat beside Reverend Parker. I was now facing the principal of Christ School and the principal of Igobi College to be interviewed by the two of them together. As a little boy, I was scared. They were white men. I had never moved close to white men before. And Reverend Parker asked me, he said, my boy, Reverend Mason tells me that you took the entrance exam to Christ School some time ago. Hey, it was as if he said I stole. I said, yes, sir, I did, sir. As if it was wrong to do so. And he said, now, you are attending this interview for Igobi College. I has come to conduct the interview to go to Christ School. Now, which of the two schools do you really want to attend? I was shaken. I was frightened. I just blotted out. I said, well, I will go to the school that first gives me the admission. That was the end of my interview. They both laughed, and that was the end of my interview. So eventually I went to Igobi College, and 1957, I left Igobi College. I was admitted to Government College Ibadan, and I did HSC, and I did well. I left King's Government College in December 1959, and in those days, you wait until September before you enter the university. So you had 9 months between leaving this HSC and going to university. So I spent those 9 months as a teacher at Oyemekun Grammar School, where I taught many, many people who are today very prominent people. Thank God for that part of my life. Of course, in September 1960, I gained admission to read economics at then University College Ibadan. Again, uneventful except for two things I want to mention. Within 10 days of becoming an undergraduate in Ibadan, late September, early October, we were informed by the Students' Union. No, don't forget, 1960 was Independence Year, October. We were informed by the union that our political leaders of the various parties had agreed with the British as a condition for their granting us independence, that whenever and wherever Britain might fight a war in the future, Nigeria must send troops to go and fight there to support the British. Not that we're going to, although they say we're independent, we'll still go and fight and die in their wars. When we heard that, we were very angry. We were angry at our leaders for betraying us. We were angry at the British for deceiving us, for saying we were independent and then still making us slaves to go and fight their own war. So what did we do? We decided to go and demonstrate in the House of Representatives in Lagos. The total student population of Ibadan at that time was about 700, boys and girls. So we hired a few buses. I headed for Lagos. We went to the buses discharged us at Ido, railway terminus. And from there, we started singing and chatting across Carter Bridge into Balogun Street, into Tinubu Square, Broad Street, all the way to Race Course, to the House of Representatives, which was in session. They didn't know we were coming. So we burst into the chambers and disrupted the meeting of the House of Representatives. Of course, they ran helter-skelter, and at that point, policemen converged on us, arrested some of us, beat us on the head, put some of us in the Black Maria, and drove those arrested to their headquarters. I was not arrested, but I was beaten and tear-gassed along with the others. Eventually, those arrested were released and we all returned to Ibadan that same night. Very eventful for us. I feel I should mention the second eventful thing that I experienced was that I was elected a member of the editorial board of the BOG, local student magazine. The BOG was a very special paper. If you carry stories about any misbehavior on the campus, whether by students or by lecturers or professors. So there was a special edition of the board. We met, the editorial board members met and selected those articles to be published. But when the board came out, it carried other articles which we did not see and which we did not approve for publication. One of them spoke about a lecturer and a female student who were alleged to have been having an affair. This upset the university authorities. So all members of the editorial board were invited before the disciplinary committee headed by Professor DK, the Vice Chancellor. At the meeting, I told the panel that I knew nothing about that offending article, that the articles were clear for publication, did not include this one. And, you know, our chief editor, I remember his name, Mr. Womeela, he said, sir, please discharge all members of the editorial board. He said, he and he alone took the responsibility to admit that offending article for publication. That whatever disciplinary action they wanted to take should be taken against him and him alone. That's what he spoke. You know, despite that, the disciplinary committee decided that he should be expelled from the university, and the rest of us who are innocent and clear by the chief editor to be suspended for the rest of the term. I felt outraged. I felt that it was inhuman to punish me and others for what we did not do. This is significant because later in my life, I will be punished for things I did not do. I spent 2 years in detention under Abacha for doing nothing. They said we were throwing bombs in Lagos. I was in Akure family. So that was the beginning of my suffering for Nigeria. I felt very, very bad. But fortunately, we didn't have to go out of the campus for the rest of the time. Some good Samaritans among the lecturers and professors intervened and got the disciplinary committee to commute our punishment to £5 fine per person. And the school and students' union paid the fine on our behalf. So these were the two highlights of my time by the university. And I graduated in 1963. Now, I spent my first year in Ibadan on my father's scholarship. But during the first session, I won the federal scholarship. So when I graduated, the federal government insisted that I must come and serve in the federal civil service in Lagos, since I was a federal scholar. And so I proceeded to Lagos.
Hi, I'm Carrie from Baltimore, Maryland, USA. I came all the way to Nigeria to Nafset Studios to remind everybody to keep watching Nafset TV on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Kindly subscribe and follow.